A night with my boss that took an unforgettable turn. You won't believe what unfolded. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest narratives. I never anticipated that evening would transform my perspective entirely. The journey of my professional life, the decisions I've made, and particularly the companion I collaborated with for more than 10 years. Yet, there are instances that catch you off guard, revealing themselves like a flawlessly orchestrated melody, each tone resonating profoundly within your soul. It began as a typical evening. The annual gala of the company had just concluded, and the city lights sparkled through the expansive glass windows of the rooftop venue. The laughter of my coworkers lingered in my mind as I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp night air, thankful for the reprieve from the clamor. The slight pinch of my heels served as a reminder of the long hours I had spent standing and smiling. As I was about to leave, I glanced back at him. James Carter, my boss for the past 12 years. Silver at the temples, sharply dressed, and always exuding the confidence of someone who has constructed their success from the very foundation. At 61, he maintained his usual composure and control, yet there was an unmistakable shift in his expression that evening. Just taking a moment to breathe, I responded, giving a faint smile. What an incredible gathering that was. He approached me, hands nestled in his pockets, his typical demeanor of command gently mellowed by the warm illumination of the streetlights. It was. To be truthful, these events don't quite resonate with me. I let out a soft laugh. Humorous. You glide through them each year. That's just business, he remarked, tilting his head slightly in my direction. You, in contrast, genuinely appeared to relish the experience. I shrugged. I guess I've mastered the role. He released a soft chuckle, and for a brief moment, we lingered in a pleasant stillness. The city buzzed with life, yet in that fleeting moment, it was merely the two of us standing together, removed from the rigid conventions of the workplace. Then arrived the words I had not anticipated. He confessed that he wasn't quite prepared to head home just yet. Would you like to join me for a drink? I paused. It was common for us to converse beyond the confines of work, engaging in late-night discussions and strategy sessions that extended into the night. Yet this seemed distinct. There was an unvoiced quality in his tone, a subtle hint that made my pulse race just a bit. Absolutely. I finally spoke up. Why not? We strolled down the street, leaving behind the dazzling towers of downtown, and venturing into a more tranquil part of the city. He guided me into a cozy lounge, dimly lit, where soft jazz played in the background. Music is softly playing in the background. It was a place that exuded a sense of eternity, remaining unspoiled by the hurried pace of the world beyond. As we nestled into a cozy corner booth, he loosened his tie, a gesture I had seldom witnessed. He gazed at. They truly observed me, as though perceiving me from a fresh perspective. You've been with the company for quite a while, he remarked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. 12 years. I acknowledged with a nod. Have you ever pondered what life could have been like if you'd selected an alternative route? His question took me by surprise. Are you inquiring whether I have any regrets about my decisions? He shook his head. No regrets. Simply a matter of curiosity. Have you ever contemplated the paths left unexplored? I released my breath gently. It seems that we all experience this at one time or another. However, I've always held the conviction that each choice, every path we choose, guides us precisely to where we're destined to be. He grinned at that. That's a thoughtful perspective on the matter. We engaged in a deep conversation, truly connecting for the first time in years. It's not focused on tasks, not on deadlines or quarterly reports, but rather on the essence of life. He shared with me his. In the beginning, the challenges of establishing the business, along with the sacrifices that accompanied the journey. I revealed fragments of my being. The aspirations I once held, the experiences that molded me. Time faded into obscurity. One drink led to another, and before long, there were three. And somewhere between nostalgia and joy, the atmosphere around us transformed. He extended his hand across the table, fingertips lightly brushing the back of my hand, tentative, exploring. I didn't withdraw. A fleeting instant. A breath held in anticipation, where all things teetered on the edge of possibility. Then, in a soft voice, he confessed, "I've never shared this with you. But my admiration for you goes deeper than just your work. Your presence has a unique ability to anchor the world, providing a sense of stability amidst the surrounding chaos." My heart raced a bit quicker. I was familiar with compliments, yet this one resonated in a unique way. It was not mere flattery. It was an essence that ran deeper, something profoundly authentic. "You've always been the one unwavering presence," he continued. Perhaps I took too much time to come to this understanding. Simply what that signifies. I hesitated, uncertain of how to reply. He was more than just a superior to me. He was a figure I had admired for years, a person whose perspective I had cherished more than I was willing to acknowledge. And yet, as I sat there, enveloped in the warmth of that softly illuminated lounge, I wasn't focused on tasks or formalities. I found myself reflecting on the way he gazed at me. As though he were encountering a woman he had never permitted himself to truly perceive before. "I suppose I should make my way home," I finally admitted, though my tone was far from certain. He observed me intently for a prolonged moment, then gave a nod. "Allow me to guide you." The streets had grown quieter, the city easing into its late-night cadence. Upon arriving at my building, we paused at the entrance. "Thank you for this evening," he expressed, "for your attentive ear." I grinned. "I might express the same sentiment to you." A moment of stillness, a brief uncertainty. And then, before I could hesitate, I leaned in, just slightly, just enough. It was a moment when everything else faded away, reducing the universe to just two souls. Where time lost its meaning, and only the present remained. Yet, just as the moment hung in the air, I hesitated, my breath faltering. "Good night, James," I murmured, entering the room before I could fully surrender to my emotions. With the door shutting behind me, I leaned against it, my heart racing. Because a change had occurred between us. And deep down, I understood that this was merely the start. The following morning, I rose earlier than usual, my thoughts still entwined with the happenings of the night before. The way James gazed at me, the warmth of his hand enveloping mine, the unvoiced sentiments lingering in the air between us. For years, I viewed him solely as my superior, a figure of authority, respect, and an unbridgeable distance. Yet, at this moment, my thoughts were consumed by him as James, the individual who had allowed his defenses lowered, someone who had communicated with a gentle honesty, who had gazed at me in a manner that sent my heart racing. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the swirling thoughts while I poured my morning coffee. This was absurd. Nothing had transpired. Nothing could occur. As I stepped into the office, an unusual, palpable tension enveloped me, as though the very atmosphere had shifted. I glimpsed him through the glass of his office. He was on a call, but for the briefest moment, his gaze lifted and connected with mine. A moment of stillness. A moment of uncertainty. He offered me the faintest of smiles. A gesture so subtle that it was meant for my eyes alone. I experienced it as a subtle tempest under my skin. The day slipped away in a haze of meetings and emails, yet my thoughts wandered endlessly. It didn't help that James appeared more engaged than usual, dropping by my desk more frequently. Essential, maintaining my stare for just a moment too long. As the afternoon wore on, a sense of restlessness began to take hold of me. I craved the invigorating embrace of fresh air, a remedy to untangle my swirling thoughts. I stepped outside onto the small office terrace, breathing in the refreshing autumn air. The city hummed. Below, a harmonious blend of distant honks and chatter. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I failed to notice the door open behind me. "You've been steering clear of me." James' voice carried a serene quality, yet it held a subtle sharpness beneath the surface. I turned, managing a soft chuckle. "Steering clear of you? That's quite theatrical." He moved in closer, hands buried in his pockets, wearing that same enigmatic look on his face. "Is it?" I let out a weary sigh, my fingers massaging my temples. "James. Last night." It was distinct, he completed it on my behalf. "I understand." I gazed up at him, the man I had stood alongside for countless years, and yet in this moment. He felt out of place. Or perhaps, for the first time, I was truly perceiving him. I whispered, "We can't do this," but even as the words left my lips, they felt empty and devoid of conviction. He observed me intently for a prolonged moment, then let out a breath. "I understand your thoughts. This is perilous. It alters the situation." "It certainly alters the situation," I asserted with conviction. "James, you hold the position of authority over me. There are guidelines, standards." "I don't care about rules," he interrupted, his voice calm yet unwavering. I gazed at him intently. This wasn't the poised, deliberate individual I recognized. This was another person entirely. Someone who, for a change, wasn't preoccupied with commerce or authority or obligations. He was contemplating my presence. "You're making this more complex than it needs to be," he continued, his tone gentler now. "Last night, we transcended the roles of boss and employee. There were merely two individuals. I believe we both experienced something profound." I gulped. "That doesn't imply it's correct." He inclined his head, his eyes probing into mine. "And yet, you haven't expressed that you don't feel it as well." I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. The truth lingered between us, palpable and unvarnished. I had sensed something. It was a sensation I hadn't experienced in ages. He moved in a fraction nearer, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "If you say I'm mistaken, I'll let it go. Last night will fade from my memory." I had the desire to. I wished to articulate the sentiments, to distance myself, to feign that all could revert to its former state. However, I did not. Because I was uncertain about my desire to proceed. The atmosphere surrounding us buzzed with tension, an unseen connection, drawing us nearer. My breath caught as he extended his hand, fingertips grazing my wrist ever so lightly. A query, not an obligation. For the first time in years, I found myself not wanting to think. I remained steadfast. James' fingertips barely brushed against the inside of my wrist, yet the sensation resonated throughout my entire being. My heart raced, the heat of his touch sending a subtle tremor through my body. For years, I had existed within the confines of what was anticipated, by others, by my profession, by the expectations tied to my age. I had constructed a life centered on certainty and logic. Yet, as I stood there with James gazing at me as though I were something novel and unforeseen, I sensed the walls begin to shift. He stood there, eyes fixed, searching for any indication that my desire matched his own. And in that moment, I truly did. I exhaled gently. "James, I'm uncertain about the direction this takes us." He offered a faint smile. "Me neither. However, that doesn't imply we should flee from it." A gentle breeze whispered across the terrace, sending a shiver down my spine. He observed right away, removing his suit jacket and gracefully placing it over my shoulders. His scent, a subtle blend of spiced cologne, something warm and familiar, enveloped me. "Let's go," he urged, gesturing toward the office door. "It's time for us to leave this place." I paused. "Are you referring to the present moment?" "Why not?" His voice carried a lightness. Yet beneath it lay a quiet determination. I peered back inside through the glass doors. The office buzzed with the lingering energy of the day, as individuals navigated the familiar rhythms of their routines. If I stepped back inside, I was certain of how the evening would unfold. I would collect my belongings, return home, prepare dinner, and sit quietly with my reflections, acting as if nothing had shifted. Yet, a shift had occurred. For the first time in ages, I felt a strong urge to seize an opportunity without hesitation. "All right," I said, my voice more composed than I had anticipated. "Let us proceed." We found ourselves in a serene, softly illuminated restaurant just a short walk away. The sort of establishment where the music played softly and the waitstaff communicated in whispers. James ordered a bottle of wine, and as the first sip caressed my throat, I felt myself begin to unwind. "So," I said, setting my glass down, "what exactly is our purpose here?" He reclined, observing me with that same inscrutable look he consistently wore in the office. Yet, this evening, an additional presence lingered in the air. To be frank, he swirled his wine, observing the way the rich crimson liquid danced in the light. "I simply wished to be in a place with you where we could be our true selves." I gulped. "Imagine." He locked his gaze with mine. That final evening held no significance. The words settled in the space between us, weighty and unyielding. I parted my lips, seeking the perfect words to express myself. Yet, for a change, I felt no desire to tread lightly. I didn't want to dissect every word before it escaped my lips. I let out a breath. Indeed, it did. A brief glimmer of emotion crossed his features. Perhaps a sense of relief. Or something more profound. We engaged in conversation for hours following that. It's not focused on tasks, nor on obligations, but rather on our connection. I shared with him truths I hadn't voiced in years. How I had dedicated so much time to prioritizing my career. How I had persuaded myself that love, passion, and connection were meant for others. Individuals in their youth. Individuals who possessed an abundance of time at their disposal. James absorbed every word, truly absorbed. As I settled into silence, he extended his hand across the table, his fingers lightly grazing mine in a gesture that was both uncomplicated and intentional, causing my breath to hitch. "You're not the only one feeling that way," he remarked. And I trusted him. As we departed from the restaurant, the city had settled into a serene hush. The streets shimmered under the gentle amber glow of streetlights, while the distant murmur of traffic filled the quiet spaces between us. We strolled for a time, both of us reluctant to part ways just yet. At a crosswalk, he paused and looked back at me. "I don't want to rush this," he murmured gently. "However, I also don't want to act as if this is insignificant." My heart raced. "James." He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head slightly. "I understand, it's intricate." I released a soft, airy laugh. "That's putting it mildly." We lingered for a moment, the city bustling around us. Yet it felt as if we were the sole two souls in existence. In that moment, driven by instinct, I moved closer, free from hesitation or elaborate thought. James' breath caught in his throat. His gaze locked onto mine. And then, at last, I allowed myself to truly feel. The kiss unfolded slowly, hesitantly. Reminiscent of the initial notes of a song whose melody remained a mystery to both of us for the moment. His hand gently cupped the side of my face, his touch tender and full of respect. As we finally parted, his forehead gently touched mine. "This alters the entire landscape, doesn't it?" I spoke softly. "It does," he whispered softly. "However, perhaps that's not as negative as it seems." I shut my eyes, allowing the warmth of the moment to envelop me. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was correct. The following morning, I awoke to a whirlwind of emotions churning within me. Anticipation, anxiety, unpredictability. The memory of last night lingered on my lips, infused with the warmth of James' touch. In the way he had gazed at me as if I were something truly worth waiting for. Yet, as the morning sun poured through my bedroom window, the grip of reality began to return. I remained under his employment. He remained my superior. We had crossed a line that was irrevocable. My phone vibrated softly on the nightstand. James. Good morning. I trust there are no regrets. A subtle grin tugged at my lips as I responded with my words. Myself. None. Me. His reply came without delay. James. Not a single one. May I have the pleasure of your company later? I paused. Not because I lacked the desire to. I did, but I was uncertain about what later held for us. Is it possible for us to thrive beyond the confines of the office? Beyond the carefully traced boundaries we had adhered to for such an extended period? I inhaled deeply. Myself. Absolutely, but we should have a conversation first. That evening, we gathered at a serene park just beyond the city's hustle, sheltered from the clamor and the watchful gazes of the workplace. James was already there when I got there, leaning against a bench, hands tucked into his pockets. He glanced up as I drew near, his expression more tender than I had ever witnessed. Greetings, he remarked. Hey, I replied, taking a seat next to him. For a brief moment, we simply lingered, observing the warm golden rays of the setting sun as they danced through the trees. Then I began to express my thoughts. James, I require your insight. Where do we proceed from this point? He breathed out, as though he had been anticipating the question all along. He acknowledged that he didn't possess all the answers. However, I am clear about what I wish to avoid. I don't want last night to fade into oblivion, as if it never occurred. I nodded slowly. I feel the same way. He shifted his gaze in my direction. Let's keep this free from rules or expectations. Let's focus on our journey together, in whatever form that may take. I gulped. And what about work? He let out a gentle laugh. I will ensure this does not impact your career. You've put in so much effort for that. Should the need arise for a discussion regarding boundaries in the workplace, we will address it. However, I'm reluctant to let go of whatever this is simply due to logistical issues. His words resonated within me, bringing a sense of calm and understanding. For an extended period, I have allowed my apprehension of the unfamiliar to prevent me from embracing risks, from experiencing emotions I convinced myself were beyond my age. Yet there was James standing next to me, ready to work through it together. I extended my hand toward him. All right, I replied, my tone unwavering. Let's explore the possibilities ahead. The joy in his smile was unmistakable. As he drew me into a slow, lingering kiss beneath the soft glow of the evening light, a realization washed over me. This was more than just a night, it transformed into an unforgettable experience. A fresh start unfolded.